Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. There's been a push lately in traditionalist Catholic thought to say that patriotism is incompatible with fervent Catholicism because a faithful Catholic cannot support a country that has serious moral shortcomings. So is patriotism blind loyalty, or is it a more Christian form of love of one's own country? We're joined by Matthew Handley, host of Ave Maria Radio's local news program, Michigan Mornings, as weekdays at 7:21 a.m., and the proprietor and author of the weekly Catholic e-newsletter, The Purple Catholic, which can be found online at purplecatholic.com. Matthew, great to speak with you. How are you?
Hey, Marcus, I'm doing well. I hope you are too. And I think this is the first time we've talked in the new year.
That's true. This is the first time we've spoken in the new year. And it's great to speak with you, especially when we're considering that you and I might have to reassess about whether or not being patriotic is virtuous.
Well, I think you and I might be on the same page as you mentioned at the introduction. I know you've talked about this as well. And I kind of came to the idea to talk a little bit about this weekend on my newsletter because I had the opportunity to be in New York over the weekend for the 125th anniversary of the fourth degree of the Knights of Columbus, which is also known as the Patriotic degree. And of course, Blessed Michael McGivney, Father Michael McGivney, the founder of the Knights of Columbus, he did see that it is true that you can be a fervent Catholic and a patriotic American at the same time. And in fact, the two are perhaps totally intertwined together based off of the commandments and based off of the words of Jesus himself.
I couldn't agree more. And in fact, if we consider, for example, the writings of especially modern popes, you think of Leo XIII, who said to love both countries of earth below and heaven above is an essential duty of a Christian. The fact is the church has never shied away from Christians being virtuous participants in the ebbs and flows and the life of the nations that they belong to. Christ has never asked us to renege from our patriotic duty. If anything, render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and to God what belongs to God.
Absolutely, and that's the quote that I love when talking about this particular issue. And I realized a new way of reading that as I wrote my essay this weekend, and that has to do in the context of the Fourth Commandment. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, in paragraph 2199, says that the Fourth Commandment is expressed explicitly for children in their relationship to their father and mother, but it also includes and presupposes, I'm quoting now, the duties of parents, instructors, teachers, leaders, magistrates, those who govern, and all who exercise authority over others or a community of persons. So when you think about those words of Jesus, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, what do we owe to our government? Well, part of making sure that we render what is due comes also from the Fourth Commandment. We are commanded to not just honor our father and mother, but honor our homeland, honor those that are in charge of us, correcting when correction needs to be had, but understanding that we're all on our path to salvation. We all require that love and prayer in order to get there.
Right. And so when we can acknowledge that, we can then rightly say that the dictates necessary for me to live a patriotic life are simply the dictates of being a virtuous citizen. I mean, think about it. There's no bad citizen who is a virtuous citizen. A virtuous citizen is one who is a model exemplar. And so Catholics can be exemplar citizens because we not only live out the natural law in how we conduct ourselves in civil duties, we can also hold our elected officials to account when they violate the natural law, which is congruent with what the Founding Fathers intended for this nation to begin with.
Absolutely. And when we participate in public life, when we make that example, we are showing what it is that we believe and what we stand by. I've written in as the context of what is a purple Catholic. It's someone who's made that conversion that is neither on either political side. You're picking from either piece in the current country that we live in. But part of that is that when you make that conversion, it radiates out. I've talked about this before. It radiates to your family, to your parish, to your community. And I truly do believe that at this point in our nation's history, just based on the fact that we have declining not just mass attendance, but church attendance as a whole, religious belief as a whole, that really belief in something, quite literally anything at this point, it would be more beneficial for this country. It shows that you've got a conviction to a particular set of values. It shows that you are committed to something outside of yourself. And because of that example, you're able to participate more actively in public life. You're not. It's not a relativistic point of view of, well, what may be good for you is not good for me, so I'm not going to step over there and say that. No, we have that conviction as Christians and as believers in general that we can say that same-sex so-called marriage is morally incorrect, that abortion is morally abhorrent. You talked about IVF yesterday with Bishop Thomas, that's morally abhorrent as well. There are lots of things that we can do as believers that are impossible to do when you're not. More so as us as Catholics, because we know that we have the truth of salvation. We have the magisterium of the church to back us up on this plan and on this journey. And it's a way for us to accompany our brothers and sisters going forward. And it's a way to, as you mentioned, our legislatures, our leaders, to help them go forward as well and to help bring all of us here into salvation.
Yep. And that's why things like the Benedict option, which calls for, well, if we're reading it in one perspective, it's calling for Catholics to develop insular communities of their own where they can promote their own flourishing. The fact of the matter is when that happens, what winds up happening is the community flourishes so much it winds up influencing outside subsets of the community, which is how we ought to be patriotic. Virtuous Catholics find other virtuous Catholics. They form virtuous families who form virtuous societies and virtuous churches. And this transforms virtuous bigger societies, that transforms the nation, that transforms the culture in the world. And that's the real call here, that there's an overflow of the living out of the call that Christ has called us to. And that's why patriotism is not antithetical to the Christian faith. It's congruent with it.
Yeah, you're exactly with that whole radiating aspect. There's one of those awful hymns from the, well, I shouldn't say awful because some people might like it. I'm not a fan, but I remember singing it as a kid. It's from the 70s or 80s. They will know we are Christians by our love. And you think about it.
Why, Matthew?
It is, well, and I'm glad you know what I'm talking about. But that it is true though. It's that example that we are setting. It's the light we are setting, and showing people that we have a message and we have a way of life that inspires joy, and that we want to share that with our community. We do that in the way we vote. We do that in the way we speak in the public square. We do that when we speak in the modern public square. I'm thinking of social media in particular. That we have these ways of influencing, and I want to pivot to what you were talking about at the beginning, where with the patriotism being love of country. That when we think about Thomas Aquinas's definition of love, of willing the other's good, it's not necessarily accepting of another person and all of and accepting of all of their sins. I'm thinking of some of those cheesy slogans like "love is love" and all this other stuff that you see nowadays. It's not merely saying whatever you do is fine and I love you. It's we talk about this on Catholic media, that it's correction, charitable correction. It's helping educate. It's helping feed the hungry, those that are hungry spiritually. And we have to do that for our country as well. We can't just step back and say, well, this isn't going to work. I'm going to pack up and move somewhere else. If we were being persecuted and we were worried about being killed on our way to Mass on Sunday, I might have a different take. But in this country, that's not something we have to worry about. Yeah. And so when we think about that Christian love of country, it means that, yes, there are faults, and I mentioned a few earlier, but we can't back away from that. We don't back away from, we don't stop loving our alcoholic or, family and friends, or those that are addicted to any particular thing. They require love and guidance, and that's what our country needs now more than ever. Yep.
And like you rightly mentioned, I've lived in nations where professing your faith can get you killed. So we don't have that as an issue here. And therefore, like you mentioned, because we can have the freedom of living virtuously, we also therefore have the freedom of conscience, and again, holding our elected officials to account, not just by the power of our votes, but making our voices heard by means of anywhere from writing to them to launching letter campaigns and the like. So the fact is, Catholics can effect change, but in order to do that, we must love the nation enough to do so. Matthew, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Marcus.
My guest, Matthew Handley, host of Ave Maria Radio's local news program, Michigan Mornings, that airs weekdays at 7:21 a.m. And he's the author of the Catholic newsletter, The Purple Catholic. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.